Russia is currently engaged in two significant conflicts: the more visible kinetic war in Ukraine and the lesser-known financial war, which often remains underreported. While the attention is drawn to the military conflict, the economic battle is equally crucial for the overall outcome. Hello, and welcome back to Tides of Wealth, where you're just one sail away from financial success. In the middle of these circumstances, a pivotal development occurred on September 21, 2023, when the Russian Ministry of Energy implemented an unusual move: a ban on gasoline and diesel exports to all countries except Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan, members of its Eurasian Economic Union. This action was a response to Western sanctions on Russian oil. As a consequence, countries like Brazil, Turkey, India, China, and even Saudi Arabia were affected. Saudi Arabia, despite being a major oil producer, found it financially beneficial to import Russian oil due to the significant price disparity between Russian Urals oil and Brent crude. By using the cheaper Russian oil for domestic consumption and selling the surplus at higher rates elsewhere, Saudi Arabia could maximize its profits. I mean, they were making money out of thin air. This interplay between sanctions, global oil markets, and strategic business decisions forms a crucial backdrop to the ongoing economic dynamics in Russia, impacting both its financial stability and the broader geopolitical landscape. You see, at the start of the Ukraine conflict, Russia collected a considerable fund called Fortress Russia, totaling a staggering $643.2 billion. The intention was to finance the war using this reserve while continuing oil sales to increase their resources. However, due to Western interference, Russia was unable to access half of this fund. As a result, in September, Russia halted oil sales. While it might seem like a move to pressure the West, the primary reason was the urgent need for fuel during the harvest season. Before the conflict, Russia was a significant global wheat supplier, contributing 14.4% of the global market share, ranking third behind China and India. Now, the thing is, harvesting this wheat requires machinery, which is crucial during the harvest season to prevent crop loss before winter. Putin initially framed the invasion as a special military operation to avoid widespread mobilization. However, after September 2022, things changed. Not only that, but since then, Russian citizens have been facing high gas prices, despite expectations of cheaper oil due to reduced exports abroad. The root cause appears to be inflation and the weakened Russian ruble. After the invasion, official inflation rates in Russia soared. With disrupted supply chains and scarcity of imported goods due to sanctions, prices in Russia surged. As a result, while there might be an abundance of rubles, there are fewer goods available, driving up prices domestically, a phenomenon recognized as inflation. Folks, the thing is, when the war started, Russians grew anxious about the stability of their ruble. This sparked a rush to banks, where people sought to convert their rubles into more secure currencies or invest in goods immune to extreme price hikes. This situation birthed two major issues: the devaluation of the ruble due to mass exchanges, and a surge in prices as increased money chased a limited supply of goods. Similar to a classic bank run, this frenzy risked depleting banks of cash, potentially destabilizing the entire financial system. Not only that, but because of this, people didn't trust the government's program that protected their money. This was a stark contrast to the confidence Americans had in the FDIC during a similar bank scare in 2023. To address these challenges, Russia's central bank implemented a savvy strategy. They drastically raised interest rates from 9.5% to 20%. This move served two purposes: incentivizing people to retain their money in banks due to higher interest earnings, and signaling proactive measures to calm the situation. This helped alleviate panic-driven withdrawals from banks and curbed spending, thereby assisting in controlling inflation. Additionally, it discouraged excessive credit use by making it less appealing, similar to tactics often employed by nations to manage their finances. Drawing parallels, the United States grappled with inflation from 2022 to 2023, deploying a similar approach by raising interest rates via the Federal Reserve to combat it. By November 2023, the US rate stood at 5.5%. However, Russia took more extreme steps in April 2022, soaring to 20%, matching the historical high set by the US in 1980. Gradually, rates tapered down to more standard levels, but a tension surfaced. While high interest rates initially boosted bank reserves, the surplus money might eventually drive increased consumer spending, potentially giving rise to inflation again. This is challenging too, because when a surplus in bank accounts meets stagnant production levels, it leads to an imbalance where excessive spending chases limited goods, fueling inflation. To counteract this, scaling up production becomes imperative. Nevertheless, high interest rates pose challenges for businesses seeking loans to invest in production, risking long-term growth. The US found a way around this issue by realizing pent-up consumer demand and incentivizing businesses to invest despite increased interest rates. However, Russian businesses encountered fundamental obstacles in boosting production. Firstly, sourcing necessary materials posed challenges despite the push for domestic production, owing to setup times. Secondly, some affluent individuals opted to leave the country instead of establishing businesses, impeding potential startups. Lastly, the demands of the war industry strained resources as the nation required various supplies such as ammunition, vehicle parts, and artillery shells. And the military is quite expensive for the country right now. British intelligence reports that the Russian military aims to claim 30% of the government's spending and approximately 6% of the country's total earnings. With the Kremlin's ability to perpetually finance these military endeavors, even resorting to printing more money if needed, civilian goods manufacturers face a dire situation. The shift in all resources, raw materials and labor, towards military production spells a decrease in civilian goods, leading to heightened prices due to scarcity. And it goes without saying that this scarcity-inflated market exacerbates inflation concerns. At the same time, surprisingly, Russia's official inflation rates present an intriguing picture too. These figures show no sign of inflation post-invasion, maintaining stability or even performing well historically for a developing nation in the midst of a conflict. As a result, when February 2023 saw a directive from the Kremlin to report significantly lower numbers, there was a lot of skepticism from the people. Hey, by the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to subscribe for more awesome videos like this. The inflation recorded at 11.8% and 11% suddenly dropped to 3.5% in March and 2.3% in April before gradually rising in subsequent months. Understanding how prices change can be pretty complicated. When we talk about inflation, we usually refer to how much prices go up in a year. For example, if inflation is said to be 3.5% for March, it means prices are increasing at a rate that would add up to 3.5% over a whole year. But on a month-to-month basis, that increase is more like 0.29%. In Russia, comparing prices in the same months of different years helps us to see how things are changing. Prices were relatively higher in March 2023 than in March 2022, but the speed at which they're rising has slowed down since then. When the conflict started, prices shot up a lot in the first 3 months, leading to an inflation rate of 11.9% in 2022. That sounds high, but it's actually not as bad as some tough economic times in the past. However, trusting Russia's reported inflation numbers isn't easy. Unlike interest rates that banks openly confirm, tracking inflation is trickier. People feel like prices are going up, but figuring out exactly how much they're rising overall is tough without doing detailed calculations. On top of that, Russia holds 3 compelling motives for misrepresenting its true inflation rate, particularly given the current context. First, on the international stage, the Kremlin aims to project a facade of economic stability to the West. Portraying Russia's economic position as robust implies that additional economic sanctions won't be effective. The second incentive, interlinked with the first, pertains to the domestic political landscape. Manipulating inflation numbers helps the Kremlin control what the media says, making it seem like things are going smoothly in the ongoing conflict. This approach discourages raising questions or inciting civil unrest about the inflation issues. People facing higher prices might feel isolated and could get in trouble if they try to protest, as the authorities might stop any disagreements. Finally, beyond the war's implications, there's a practical benefit to manipulating inflation figures. When workers perceive rising prices, they demand higher wages to match the cost of living. However, this wage increase can further escalate prices, perpetuating a cycle known as wage price spiral. Central bankers aim to prevent this inflationary loop from intensifying. In September, Putin said inflation was hurting businesses. At the time, the yearly inflation rate was 5.1%, which means prices had gone up by 5.1% over the year. Every month, prices were going up by around 0.28%. Predictions said inflation for 2023 would be about 5.55%, showing that businesses were having a hard time. The central bank tried to help by raising interest rates to 13% in September, but it didn't really work. By the end of November, inflation had gone up to 7.5%, and forecasts said it might reach 8% by the end of the year. So in December, the central bank had to raise interest rates again, this time to 16%. It seems like inflation in Russia keeps getting worse. To put things in perspective, inflation in the US hit a high of 9.1% in June of 2022. That gives an idea of how tough the inflation situation in Russia is right now. Shifting focus to public responses during periods of severe inflation reveals one common solution: moving money into a more stable currency. This brings attention to the ruble's exchange rate, a crucial indicator. At the onset of the war, the central bank and Kremlin executed three crucial measures to address the issue. First, they put limits on Russians using foreign money to stop too many dollars or euros from being used in the country. Secondly, domestic lenders were prohibited from utilizing foreign currency for loans, compelling reliance on the ruble. This strengthened the ruble's appearance initially. Before the war, in late 2021, 100 rubles could purchase $1.30, plummeting to 70 cents at the war's outset on March 10, 2022. Surprisingly, by June 30th, it had surged to $1.80, surpassing pre-war levels. However, this perceived strength was short-lived. Continued war pressures transformed these temporary fixes into long-term challenges. For businesses reliant on local sales, the rapid devaluation of the local currency due to inflation posed significant problems. However, the option to sell products globally became an attractive alternative. Despite potential political hurdles and the necessity of selling at reduced rates abroad, dealing in stronger foreign currencies appeared more lucrative. So now the question is, what's going to happen next? A couple of scenarios can unfold. Either prices surge within the country to maintain equilibrium, or there's a scarcity of goods for those seeking to buy at regular prices. Traditionally, Russia paid oil companies to ensure ample supplies domestically. However, the burgeoning costs of war compelled the government to slash these payments by half in September, leading to significant implications. This intricate web of issues poses a challenge for the Kremlin. Few things enrage the average citizen more than government tampering with retirement programs. Putin experienced this firsthand following a failed 2018 pension reform plan. Another surefire way to ignite public fury is surging fuel prices, a fact Putin knows well. The Nord Stream plan, aimed at pressuring Germany into accepting Russia's intended annexation of Ukraine by leveraging natural gas prices, faced a setback. Germany's shift to alternative energy sources prompted Russia to tackle similar fuel price hikes at home. Confronted with reduced payments to oil companies, Russia opted to halt oil exports, keeping the supply within the country to stave off shortages, lower market prices, and curb inflation. Yet, economically, this move was inefficient. Even though expensive fuel didn't make travel or farming impossible, shifting resources from unsold winter crops to sell more profitable oil highlighted how complicated things were. Looking at the bigger picture, there are different views on Putin's popularity. Some say that he's unpopular, while others believe his position is invincible. The truth likely lies in between. Pre-war, there was little evidence of how unpopular Putin really was. However, pushing policies too far risks public backlash, as seen with attempts to amend the pension system or mass departures after the September 2022 mobilization. The oil export ban seemingly aimed to maintain internal stability and preserve Putin's position. This benefited Ukraine by limiting funds for the war. It seemed like not many people in Russia were happy about the invasion. Ukraine had expected Russia to avoid further military action in 2023, thinking this was when Russia stopped selling oil. The Kremlin didn't want to deal with the discontent at home or worries about more people being forced into the military. That's why they only stopped selling oil for a short time. When the harvest ended and winter came, they allowed some oil exports again to get money for the war. In October, Russia let companies export some diesel and started paying less money to manage the financial impact, which added up to $4 billion. This showed they were prioritizing funding the war again instead of caring for problems at home. All in all, Russia is in a huge mess right now. Vladislav Inozemtsev, an advisor, thinks Russia's economy might end up like it did after the Cold War. He pointed out some problems that could make things tough for Russia. Russia's industry is getting smaller and less advanced. Companies from the West are leaving, and the machinery they left behind isn't in good shape. This hurts parts of the economy, like car sales, which have dropped a lot because of the war. Also, Russia is relying more on China for manufactured goods, especially high-tech products, as other countries don't want to trade with Russia. Russia might rely completely on China for trade by the end of the decade, which isn't good for its growth. On top of that, Russia's population is shrinking. Even before the war, fewer people were there, and now more might leave because of the war and the not-so-good economy. This causes problems, like not having enough workers. Lastly, Russia is losing money because of how it's handling the war. The government is spending a lot on the military and taking over businesses' assets. This will lead to big problems for Russia's economy. He estimates that by the end of the decade, Russia's economy might drop a lot, the population could go down by millions, and the value of its money might fall a bunch. Other experts also worry about Russia's economy, but the government in Moscow thinks it will grow this year, even more than what experts think. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching this video on the Russian economic crisis. Let us know in the comments below what you think is the future of the Russian economy. See you soon.